It's a little dangerous to shoot here. Cops keep coming up to me and asking what I'm doing here. Hello friends. My name is John Connor. Today we will visit the capital of the United States of America, the city of Washington, D.C. With the eyes of a researcher open, we will walk along its streets and find ancient houses and monuments made of white marble buried many meters underground. We will learn the mysterious history of the famous building of the White House, next to which the Americans are still excavating. Let's compare the capital with St. Isaac's Cathedral in St. Petersburg and find out how the capital was dug up as much as 30 meters during restoration. Bypassing the army of policemen, we will photograph the unearthed treasury of the White House. We will find the twin brother of the Bronze Horseman from St. Petersburg. We will study the famous Lincoln Memorial and the Washington Monument, which, judging by the materials found, were not rebuilt but restored. We learn that the same War of 1812 destroyed the capital of the United States of America, just like Napoleon burned down Moscow. We will even find fragments of megalithic polygonal masonry left over from the previous owners of the American capital in the very center of the city. In general, sit down comfortably, as always it will be very interesting. Washington is the capital of the United States of America. Let's start with some official history. Washington was founded on July 16, 1790. On the banks of the Potomac River between Georgetown and Alexandria, based on the law on the seat, which provided for the right to choose the location of the American capital to the first U.S. President George Washington, the national capital must be independent of the states for its maintenance and security by the decision of Congress. The territory of the district was originally defined by Congress as a square with a country equal to 10 miles and covered the nearest cities. But a year later, Congress amended the law and Alexandria was not included in the capital territory. Let's not focus on the name of the city now. Friends, this is a completely different city. Let's continue with Washington. The Central District was subsequently named the District of Columbia after the symbol representing the United States. By the way, did you know why the district was named that way? And why did this symbol represent the United States of that time? People had to have something to unite, especially in such a difficult time. Columbia or Lady Columbia. This is the personification of America, which was transformed from the name of Christopher Columbus. Feminine in the role of a mother for a man. Represents security and protection. We can say that this is how the meaning appears, to love and protect something dear and close, personifying the house. Columbia of that time was depicted as a woman dressed in the colors of the American flag and wearing a Phrygian cap, personifying liberation from slavery. And now back to the city itself and its environs. To mark the county's borders, Washington's close associates placed 36 boundary stones around the perimeter. Funny way, isn't it? But oh well. These stones can still be found in those places to this day, although some of them, in our time, look like ordinary stones, which do not exactly say that this is some kind of boundary marker. You know who won the competition for the planning of the future city? French architect Pierre-Charles L'Enfant. It is noteworthy that the Frenchman graduated from the Royal Academy of Sculpture and Painting in Paris. So, the natural question is how a graduate of the Academy of Painting suddenly became an architect. Let's study a little more history. After graduation, he comes to the state and, together with Lafayette, participates in the American War of Independence. Meet Washington. Takes part in the creation of the Cincinnatus Order. Designs the first building of Federal Hall in New York, and then offers a competition entry for the master plan for the city of Washington. And when did he do it all? And he fought and acquired the knowledge of an architect, and in addition to everything, he was also engaged in landscape design. It seems to me that in peacetime it takes years, even decades. Well, come on, let's leave it as just a little oddity. It turns out that the developed plan was not at all original, because L'Enfant took as a basis the project of the Park of Versailles, which also took into account the unevenness of the landscape, the streets forming a rectangular grid, buildings, monuments, and parks. Only now the development of the plan of the Van Sable Park in France was carried out by a real hereditary gardener, artist and architect, who was also involved in landscape design. His name is André Le Nôtre. Such a track record makes one question the veracity of this story of L'Enfant's creation of a plan for the city. After all, judge for yourself how many hours of education, What teachers, masters and knowledge for such chic projects that have passed through centuries and history? The version sounds extremely unreliable in my opinion. As a result, Lenfant is removed from his post. He dies in poverty. Other people are engaged in urban planning, but his idea is still embodied in future construction. This is a turn for a man with such achievements. By the way, here is the plan of Versailles, look, and this is Washington's plan. Find the differences. The Capitol was built during the American War of Independence. This is not mentioned in the textbooks of our history, but while Russia was at war with Napoleon in 1812 and Moscow was burned down by fire, very similar events took place on the other side of the world. Britain has few wars in neighboring territories and she directs her forces to another continent. Great Britain captures the city of Washington and starts setting fire to important strategic sites. This is how the Capitol, the White House, the Senate building, the House of Representatives and the Library of Congress burned down. Where does Britain even have such a number of troops to have time to fight the whole world at once? And the dates, friends, are absolutely identical. 1812, but the fire in Washington in 1814 moved 2 years. Two great capitals and two great flames. Okay, as a result of the fires, we see a similar situation. Only thick walls remained, everything else burned down. Or was the building all over the world found like this? But what is left of them? Or are such similar events covering up something more global? These are the versions that come to me at first glance. In the fire, as expected, books, documents, and a lot of important information in any other form burned down. Only battle data remains. Who, how much, when, where. We are provided with military events in detailed details as if they were the most important in the history of mankind, and information about how these monumental structures were built is simply not available. After the fire in the Capitol, it was decided to move the meeting to another building. Here it is, in the photo, is a red brick building. But here's what really caught my attention. These are chimneys. There are several of them, which means that it was cold. But then the question arises, where are the chimneys on the Capitol buildings? This is what happens, such a small house was heated by several stoves. And buildings of this magnitude do not have them. I wonder how they then illuminated the buildings from the inside? Silly question, I understand. Candles, you say? Only this is how many candles are needed to consecrate such buildings. How flammable is it under all circumstances? How to replace them? Where can you get so many? And that's not counting heating. What about candle soot? Historians have no answer to these questions. Friends, I will read another small excerpt from the Wikipedia article about the fire in Washington in 1814, which you can think about. So, in less than a day after the start of the attack, a strong thunderstorm with showers extinguished most of the fires. In addition, a tornado passed through the center of the Capitol, lifting 2 cannons into the air and throwing them several yards, killing several British soldiers and residents of the city in the process. Notice how this disaster is described. Tornado, storm, rain, thunderstorm, in principle, a direct reference that if something could be there, everything is honest, we described everything, even the soldiers got hurt. The storm forced the British to return to their ships, many of which were badly damaged. Also an extremely interesting point. Pay attention, friends, in 1812 in Moscow, a fire drove Napoleon out of the city, hindering his plans. And then the tornado drove the British away. It also turns out that the occupation of Washington lasted only 26 hours. Aren't there too many coincidences, friends, when I put it all together? Believe it or not, this story is up to you. Perhaps, indeed, Britain, with its powerful special forces, quickly captured America, which was unprotected at that time. And perhaps this story hides a really destroyed country, some kind of global cataclysm. Then the country was repopulated by immigrants from Europe in those days. And now, friends, I will try to compare the American capital with our beloved and well-known St. Petersburg. So, walking around the city, architectural solutions that are already familiar to the eye, houses that go underground, stairs to the second floor are striking. Stairs to the second floor, but the first, apparently, was only dug out, judging by the window. Works of high precision from granite and stone. These are granite vases, friends. But it is not like ancient architecture, stars, eagles, and so on. But the fact that this is granite and that this is a very high-quality work is beyond doubt. If you remove the attributes that distinguish countries from each other, such as flags, car numbers, city signs, it will be difficult to determine which particular city you are in. If you do not take into account modern buildings and skyscrapers, of course. A building with columns that are dug around, the image of lions, the faces of some people, huge doors that were made for some unknown purpose. The bronze sculptures near the white stone monuments look like foreign bodies that appeared later or replaced the old ones that were inconvenient for history. With many buildings and architectural solutions, the city really resembles St. Petersburg. Agree, the cladding of the building in the form of large blocks is generally identical. If you hang the inscription "Bakery" on an old American house, it will seem that you are in the center of St. Petersburg. But friends, right at the walls of the White House, brother of the Bronze Horseman, Jackson. Interestingly, he also welded his head separately. Or was it finally conceived and done right? It looks like a rock, but not as gigantic as we have in St. Petersburg. A man on a horse is cast in bronze for the locals, according to history. But if we look at it without knowing any dates or names, without comparing names and without knowing its entire history of creation, what will we see? The same green bronze statue, pedestals of large granite blocks. Considered as a whole, the monuments are a copy of each other with slight differences. And here, for example, polygonal masonry, which, like two drops of water, resembles polygonal masonry, forts, the city of Kronstadt. Blocks of completely different geometric shapes, perfectly folded and fitted to each other. How was this achieved, moreover, in different parts of the world, given that the story says about the uneducated people of those years? And they say we live in an age of progress. Yes, telephones and computers appeared, but such quality, such masonry for buildings that have stood for more than 100 years is unique for us even now. Okay, let's put philosophy aside. Let's walk a little more. The building and stairs are built of white stone and marble on such a scale that it is difficult to imagine the volume of extraction, transportation, processing, and construction of these structures. Why build cylindrical columns for buildings when it's a labor-intensive process that requires maximum precision? After all, it is much easier to make rectangular columns if you really want to use them in architecture. Well, they built it before, you say. Houses were built underground, windows were first made and then bricked up. They did not want to invent their own style. And why? Because Italian, French, and Greek architects have long thought up and invented everything. Hence the similarity of cities around the world. Let's do it. Our further research will surely shed some light on this dark history. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next movie. Also write your opinion, I will be interested to read.